Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. I'm your host, Ashley Russo, president and executive producer of The Peak TV. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers who are winners in their field and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Hey everybody, we're so glad that you're joining us. My good friend, it is so much fun to start a podcast with someone I can say is my good friend, Pam Deller. She's the publisher of Lehigh Valley Style Magazine. You know it, you've read it, you love it. We do, we love it, Pam. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, I'm grateful to be here.
So before you were this magazine mogul,
Okay.
tell me a little bit about where did you grow up?
I grew up in Coopersburg, right here in the Lehigh Valley. My parents were from Coopersburg. They both went to Southern Lehigh High School. I went to Southern Lehigh High School. My grandfather was the superintendent of Southern Lehigh High School in the 60s. So we're like this Coopersburg family.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that you had been in Coopersburg your whole life
never
and
left.
multi-generations.
Exactly. And then I raised my kids there. And now I have to say I moved one zip code over. I'm in Center Valley now. So that was my big move.
Do you feel like you're a traitor to Coopersburg?
I kind of do. I kind of do. When I go in Coopersburg, I feel like, I don't know, I literally grew up and I lived on Main Street. And
it is a true Main Street, too. For people who may not be familiar with Coopersburg, Pennsylvania, to me, it is kind of the all-American Main Street, and it's maintained that. Mm-hmm. So how did that kind of influence your childhood, having that environment? They have great parades and...
Yeah, it was very just an idyllic, small-town childhood. We, got on our bikes every morning and rode them until my mom rang the dinner bell at 5 o'clock every day. Like, we just played outside. We played in the creek and, rode our bikes up and down and, things that kids can't do today, like be outside alone all day.
Right.
We did it. That's all we did.
I know. I think about all the time because I grew up in a little town in New Jersey, kind of right off of a main street, and there was a little cut through this field that led to the back of this neighborhood that led to the library, and then that was like one block over from the pizza parlor and the penny candy. And I remember being, 9, 10 years old, and my siblings, I think, were really young, 6, whatever, and we just went to town.
Yeah,
and we'd go to the library and hang out. Kids today will never know what it was to go and check out a tape.
Exactly.
Or sit and listen to the tape at the library. What were you like as a kid? Like if I think of you at 7 years old, describe yourself.
Oh, interesting. I think I was quiet. And I would have to say I was a little bit fearful. Like, I didn't want to stay over at friend's house. I was never that girl. I was pretty much, I grew up in the church. So my family was super involved in the church. So all day Sunday, Wednesday night, Friday night youth group. So we were always just like really involved in the church. And I think that's kind of what our world centered around at that time.
That was a big part of your growing up and identity. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have an older sister. She's a nurse and she lives in Virginia. And I have a younger brother and he's a Quakertown police officer.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Lots of service in your family.
Yeah.
What was it like being the middle child? I mean, were you the peacemaker? Were you the instigator? What were you?
I was pretty much the peacemaker. And I think that really led to what I do now really well is just like figure how to, make everything okay for everyone. I think that's what I did a lot.
That's interesting. What about sports or hobbies? Did you take any music lessons or play
any
sports?
I failed miserably at piano.
Me too.
I wanted to do it, but
lessons.
I just couldn't practice.
Yeah, me neither.
One thing I did do, I never played sports, but in middle school, my neighbor was a majorette, and I would watch her twirl her baton. So I started doing that, and I ended up being like the head majorette in high school and the drum majorette for the band.
I hope there's some photos of that we can throw up on YouTube.
There's some really embarrassing photos. Yeah,
we're so excited that you'll share those with us, Pam. That's great. That seems very hard to me. The spinning of the twirling of the baton. Did you just practice in your backyard and think I'm going to learn this?
Just all by myself, hit myself in the head a lot.
And what kind of student were you?
I was an interesting student. I actually have a really good short-term memory. So my parents would complain. I never brought a book home, but I had straight A's. So I could read something right before a test and ace the test. But to this day, I don't remember, anything about chemistry or algebra or anything, but I got straight A's all through high school.
That's so funny. How do you find that you can use that skill set now? Like, do you still have a good short-term memory?
I do have a really good short-term memory.
But you're not sure what happened last week.
Well, last night. No.
That's cool. That's kind of a fun skill set. That's almost like someone with a photographic memory. Who
Yeah,
can just read it
but
and
really
it sticks.
short term though. So I mean,
I
it was.
think I kind of have that a little bit too, because I can remember things that I need in the moment. But you go back and, people who can, my husband can tell stories
Yes.
with such detail when he was 10.
Right.
And I just remember the broad strokes.
Same.
I don't really remember the specifics of a conversation
I'm exactly
35
the
years
same.
ago.
Yeah, exactly the same.
Yeah, okay, it's interesting. Well, we both move at a fast pace. Maybe that has something to do with it. What about high school? So you went to Southern Lehigh High School?
Yes.
Okay. How was that? What were you involved with? Were there any clubs or things that you did? Majorette probably took a lot of your time.
That took a lot of time. Again, was real active in our youth group, so that took a lot of time. And I was always kind of, part of like the student government in some way, or like the prom committee or something like that. I was on a lot of committees.
Okay, planning events.
Yes.
Oh, funny coincidence.
Yeah, exactly.
And what were your thoughts like in high school? Did you know what you wanted to do with your life? Did you have any sense of?
No, I had no clue whatsoever. And I think I often tell people now, I think that people who have that concrete idea of what they want to be, I feel like they're really fortunate. My sister always wanted to be a nurse. My brother always wanted to be a police officer. And I never knew what I wanted to be. So I ended up deciding, my parents didn't really push me to like look into college or anything like that. So I thought, I was really bored in school actually. And I thought, I'm going to take a year off. And I took a year off and I never went to college.
Yeah, but what did you do in that year?
Well, in that year, I worked at a bank. And, prior to that, like in high school, I worked at the Coopersburg IGA. And I remember like always, no matter what job I had a series of jobs. I worked at Junior Colony, like in the fashion, retail kind of thing, and then worked at a bank. And I always just wanted to be really good at, if I was packing your groceries, I wanted to pack them better than the person next to me could pack them, or,
So competitive.
very
but
competitive, or like driven to like want to do the best no matter what my job was.
I think it's really interesting and honestly, in a lot of ways, very ahead of your time to make that decision to sort of take a year off and not knowing what you wanted to do, maybe not pursue like the classic college education. I feel like the pendulum is swinging a little in our society right now because so many people are pushed to that and they don't know what they want to do with their life.
I mean,
I'm not dissuading people from an education.
Right.
However,
well, I think like now it's expected that everyone goes to college, but I'm talking about, I graduated from high school in 1981, and my father was a blue collar worker. A lot of the people in our lives were all, they worked at Mack Truck or Bethlehem Steel, or my dad worked at Western Electric. So
kind of career corporate jobs
or
blue
on
collar
the assembly
line,
line, or, that kind of thing. So there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about higher education or what do you want to be.
Unless you knew I'm definitely going to be a nurse, or I'm
Right.
definitely going to be a teacher or something like that.
Exactly.
Which, yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is that, now with the costs being what they are, there's thought around that again.
Right.
Because it is. So what did you learn in that year? You talked about having different types of jobs. What was it like working at a bank? I've always wondered what it would be like to work at a
You know what?
bank.
It was fascinating, actually. And it helped me so much to this day, like have an appreciation for money and accuracy. Because one of the first things they would do in your training week, you sat in a room and they taught you how to count money. And they would literally sit you at a table and put hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in front of you. And they totally desensitized you to the fact that like this had anything to do with you. Like it just became your job. It didn't become like
this is $500,
right?
Or this
not,
is $2,000.
or like right,
Yeah, it's
like
just,
and they also like
interesting.
Yeah, so you became desensitized to it, but also it made me understand money a lot more and the importance of like balancing your checkbook and like knowing that you have $100 and how are you going to make that last to the end of the week, because money didn't grow on trees.
Right. Like practical
even though
life
at work
skills.
it did, but at home it did not.
I would imagine if you're young and they throw you in a room with thousands of dollars, you're like, wow, maybe money does grow on trees. Or at least it grows at banks.
Yeah,
so it's a
exactly.
good lesson. All right, good. Well, coming up next, we're going to talk to Pam about her career path, kind of where your adult life took you, and we'll learn more after the break. Stick with us. As a mother of two, I know it can be tough to find activities that everyone will enjoy. Luckily, the Lehigh Valley has so many ways to treat your family without breaking the bank. You can experience cool discoveries at the Da Vinci Science Center or all aboard the WKNS railroad train for an afternoon adventure. There's fun around every corner of the Lehigh Valley, and you can uncover it all on Discover Lehigh Valley's website. Visit discoverlehighvalley.com for more information. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I am here with my good friend Pam Deller. She's the publisher of Lehigh Valley Style Magazine, and she was just telling us how she actually got started as a banker, learning bank. And I was saying, Pam, that I would love the concept of just being able to take a year and try a different job every single week. Maybe just long enough that you could get a taste for it. I'm so curious. Like, I'm someone who would go to the bank, and I want to know, like, what's it feel like to be the bank teller? What is it, did you get to be a teller?
I ended up being the collection teller. So it was like there was a head teller and a collection teller.
What is the difference? What does a collection teller do?
The collection teller orders the money, and like it would, if you were running low on hundreds and you knew payday was coming up, or like Social Security checks are coming out on the first of the month, you need to have extra money on hand. So that kind of thing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of advanced planning, and you get to use the little speaker, which probably is fun.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so after you kind of take that time off after high school, what comes next? And what do you start thinking is going to be what you do?
I never really thought about it. I just feel like everything kind of happened organically to me. Like looking back at it now, I ended up getting married at 19, and I had my first daughter at 21, and I remember so I kind of didn't work her first year, and I remember she was turning 1, and I said, I'm going to find a job. I need to get a job now. And I had no thought in my head about what it would be other than I wanted it to be something like fun and interesting. And I opened up the paper on a Sunday when there were pages and pages of employment opportunities, and there was a job working for a concert promoter. And I'm like, that sounds fun. So I went on an interview, and they were interviewing like 50 girls that day. And then I got a second interview, and I ended up, a week later, a week after my daughter turned 1, I started a job working for a concert promoter, and my job was answering the phones, selling tickets over the phone. This is prior to Ticketmaster. Right. And I would write press releases, like we were having bands come in. I would work with the radio stations and arrange interviews. So at the time, again, it was the 80s, so we're talking Ozzy Osbourne and Whitesnake and Def Leppard and Metallica and all these like big metal bands we did a lot of.
That's so much
fun,
But
it was fun. And then during the show...
Like something you could never predict.
No. And then during, the shows, we would work with the band's management and pay them. And it was actually like a really fun, interesting thing. And it just happened to me. I didn't think I wanted to, never even thought about working in that industry. But it just kind of organically happened, and it was fabulous.
Do you think that you talked about being a little bit quiet as a kid, and yet you're describing things in your early adult life, really pretty formative years, where you said yes. You said yes to, trying something totally new. You said yes to getting married young. You said yes to having a baby young. You took on all these kind of adventures. Was that a shift in your personality, or do you think that was something that was building up? And have you always kind of had an adventurous spirit?
I wouldn't say that I felt particularly adventurous. I just feel like for whatever happened, I just to this day feel like every day in my life was exactly as it was supposed to be, and it just kind of happened. And every minute I was where I was supposed to be, whether it was a good decision or a bad decision. It was what was supposed to happen.
That is so neat. And you talked about your daughter, and you have 3 beautiful daughters. And tell me a little bit about what that was like being a mom. I was on the younger side as a mom too. But not that young. So what was that like?
Well, my first 2 I had young. I had them at 21 and 25. So I feel like I was a very unconscious parent. Now looking back, I wish I had been more conscious of some of the things that I know now that I could have imparted to them. But they turned out pretty well, despite that. But I was definitely a different parent. And then, so I had them at 21, 25, and then I had my third daughter at 35. So there was a totally different perspective. And, I had one in high school when I had, one in diapers. So it was definitely a bigger shift, and I had a lot more, I think, presence and understood a lot more about myself and parenting, for my third. But they're all very unique and very different to
Yeah, and
this
they would
day.
probably all say that place that you were in your life had a positive influence on them, different, but still.
Yeah.
So concert promoting, how long does that last?
That lasts almost 10 years. And then there was a lot of changes in the concert industry, and the smaller promoters kind of went by the wayside when the big iHearts and things like that came along and just started owning entire tours. They didn't go from city to city and work with a different promoter in each city.
See, it's almost hard for people today to understand. Well, first of all, just to understand pre-internet,
Correct.
what it was like to
Oh,
do
right,
business pre-internet. So describe that piece just a little bit, because when you talk about it, it's a foreign concept of a band would have a tour, and they would contact a promoter in every city.
And then in every city, someone, in the promoter's office you would call the local radio stations and say, hey, we have this coming up. Or you would try and get publicity. You would give them tickets to give away on the air. You would, call the morning call and the Express Times and try and get phone interviews for them with the artists so that you had some publicity in advance. And we also had a cash budget. Obviously, we bought radio and print to promote it. But it was totally different. You couldn't go online to see where your favorite artist is going to be for the next year. It was just oh, that's coming to my town. Or it was just, very different.
And I would think that you would have your hand in so many aspects of that business that really touched a lot of other business acumen that you developed over the way. I mean, you're answering phones, you're dealing with press, you're, that's
you're
pretty
paying
wide.
people,
Yeah.
you're organizing the catering and, securing a venue and all kinds of things. So
Do you look back at that time and think that it gave you a great foundation for a lot of the skills you went on to develop?
yeah, because it was I never had from that job on, it was never just one thing. You just work on assembly line, you turn this screw. It was always you had to juggle a lot of things and work with a lot of people.
Kind of like your life in magazines and our life in television.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Just be quick on your feet.
Yeah, that's what I always felt like. I felt like formative jobs, like those early years, I always loved that no day was the same. Things were constantly changing. You had to always problem solve. I think that was fun. Not for everybody, for sure, but it was fun.
No, but that is, like you just mentioned, my favorite thing is problem solving, because I feel like that's what I do for a living, is solve problems.
Me too.
And, make things happen.
Was there any story on those 10 years of concerts that's some crazy, memorable story that comes to mind? I mean, we just talked about the fact that neither of us can remember anything.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I can't say there was anything really crazy. There was artists I thought were going to be, and I'm not going to name names here, but there were artists who I couldn't wait to meet, and then they were so disappointing and self-absorbed and rude. And then there were other artists who you wouldn't, maybe it wasn't my genre or something I was personally interested in, and got to meet them and found them to be really humble, incredible people. I mean, I have some funny stories I won't share with you about having to clean up the dressing room for Guns N' Roses, but yeah, I'm not gonna.
Did you ever get the requests of no green M&Ms? You always hear that.
You know what? So every artist had what they call a rider, and it would be what food they wanted. I remember George Carlin. We did a lot of shows with George Carlin, and he wasn't fussy. He just had severe allergies and things like that. So it'd be like romaine lettuce, no dressing, and things like that. So he wasn't being difficult. He was just being
His health.
right, exactly. And
Interesting.
it makes sense, because when you think about the artist is in Allentown today and New York tomorrow and Connecticut, the next day, they don't want to have spaghetti 3 nights in a row. So on a Monday, we have this menu. On a Tuesday, we have this menu. Or else they would have no idea. They could literally be eating the same food in every
You
city.
have to plan it out. I mean, it's funny. You think about traveling. I've been traveling a little bit more for work recently, and I have to be very conscious of the prep of the way I want to eat. Because if you allow yourself to just grab the wrong thing all the time, you're not going to feel well. So I get it. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, so
and then I'm sure there's some that just did some weird stuff just to,
Yeah,
bug
and
the
they
promoter.
right, and that's where the no green M&Ms came in.
Right,
They
right,
were
right.
just being ridiculous.
That's
To be
funny.
funny.
All right, well, when we get back with Pam, I want to talk a little bit about being a working mom, kind of that balance, that life balance, and then how you got into the publishing industry. So we'll be right back with Pam Deller in just a few minutes. Home to the Iron Pigs in Dorney Park, Allentown is a city without limits. Food, art, dance, you name it, it's got it. Allentown's historic roots are matched with its vibrant culture to create an adventure that you'll never forget. Thinking of taking a trip? Follow Lehigh Valley PA on Instagram, and you'll find attractions, hotels, and sites you won't want to miss. Welcome back with Pam Deller from Lehigh Valley Style. Pam, we've been talking about your illustrious career and rise to publishing, being in the concert industry and having some interesting jobs in fashion and the banking industry. When did you make the shift into what you do now? I know we've sort of missed a chapter, but after the concert industry, what came next?
The concert industry was winding down, and I became a single parent. And I needed a job where I could make more money than I was currently making. And I worked with a lot of the radio stations, buying radio time. So I had a lot of connections there. And I interviewed with several of the local radio stations, and was convinced that being in radio advertising sales could be really lucrative. So I started, and I was totally against being in sales. Like, again, didn't feel confident or feel like I was a salesperson. And what I learned was all you really need to be is authentic and have a conversation with someone. And if you can help their business, by selling them, like, here's the listeners of this station, they would be a good fit for you to advertise your business. And it just became a simple conversation, and I actually did really well at it.
Yeah, building relationships and connecting with people. Through all this, certainly when you were working as a concert promoter, you've got two small kids at home. It's tough to be a working mom. How did you balance it all? And I would imagine the hours might have been a little wacky.
Yeah.
And how did that work out?
It's no matter what you do, it's a challenge to be a working mom. I mean, you have responsibilities in your home and responsibilities to your children, and you have responsibilities to your employer. So it's always, a balancing act. And I think, I don't know, I just always felt like you just have to do it. If you have to stay up late to get something done, you stay up late to get something done. There's no opportunity to not be good at it. So, if you get up early to pack lunches and spend as much time with your kids, and, you're working while they're at school, and, it's something you just have to do.
Do you feel like, as someone now who manages a team, that you have any, I don't know, maybe empathy or understanding or expectations around the moms in your office?
Yeah, I have total empathy for the young moms in the office, because I remember being there, and, what do you do when your kid is sick? And, in the work environment that I've created now, if your kid is sick, bring your kid to work. And, I brought my daughter Olivia. When she was sick, she would lay on her sleeping bag under my desk, at work, because I did have that flexibility. Like, I couldn't take the day off, but I could bring her with me. So I like giving that flexibility to the working moms, that I work with now. And if, it is a different world now, because now you take your laptop home with you.
Right.
So
Work kind of can follow
if your
you.
child is sick, you can still keep up at home. We all work remotely at times, so it's so much easier now.
Yeah.
I think, to balance that. I think there's other demands.
But you can't walk away from it either.
Right, exactly.
We
So
used to
it's
be
like-
able to leave work.
Right, and work
done.
ended there.
Right. So we don't have that. But I guess that, to me, that's a little bit of the trade-off, is having that flexibility in the workplace. And so you go on to this job in radio.
So I did that.
You end up liking sales.
I
sort
did.
of being surprised.
Right,
Do you feel
and
like you met a lot of people in the Lehigh Valley through
I
that?
met a lot of people in the Lehigh Valley, and I still have people to this day that I work with at the magazine. That some of my first clients in radio are still my friends and clients at the magazine that we still have relationships with. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And how does that then spin into the magazine? And did you ever see yourself in the publishing world?
No, never. And so when my third daughter was born, I took a year off from radio and really thought about what it was I wanted to do. I was remarried at the time, so I had that luxury of taking a year off. And my escape was on a Monday night. I would go to the Southern Lehigh Public Library and I would sit there for 2 hours and I would read the magazines. I would just sit there at a table and I would read magazines. I loved magazines and I loved Philadelphia Magazine. It was, like the first city and regional magazine that I was exposed to and really enjoyed. And so that was my escape. And one day, reading at the public library, I saw a magazine called Lehigh Valley Style. It launched in October 2000. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. There's a magazine here. And so I thought about it, for a while, and it was a bi-monthly at that time. And I, saw it over the period of a couple months. And at that time, Olivia was she was a little over a year old. And I was like, I wonder if I could work there. So I literally called the publisher and he said, yeah, come in for an interview. I met him for an interview in Bethlehem. And he said, well, I don't have any money to pay you, but if you want to work for commission only, if you sell something, I'll pay you a commission on it, but I'm not paying you otherwise. And I went home and I was like, well, what do I have to lose? And so that's how I started. I mean, I literally didn't make any money for a year. It took, it was a brand new magazine. People weren't trusting it. They didn't know who it was going to reach, who was reading it. And I literally didn't make any money for a year.
And I would imagine the things that you're able to say in a sales conversation around a radio spot, you didn't really have with a new brand because you didn't have the readership or the following.
No.
So it's hard to sell under that circumstance.
Yeah.
But boy, I bet that taught you a lot.
It absolutely did. But I loved it. And I loved learning about the magazine and, how it's put together and how, stories come together. And, I felt like I was really fortunate to be on the ground floor, when it started.
So over these years, so the magazine's been around now, I guess that means 19 years.
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah.
It's exciting. Next
Yeah.
year's the 20th.
Mm-hmm,
And you've been
is.
around almost since the beginning.
Yes.
What's it been like to be a part of that growth over almost 20 years of this brand? I mean, certainly it is, so well known, so respected, so loved in the area, and, largely because of what you have done for that magazine.
Well, I think, again, I just feel really grateful to have been on the ground floor. The gentleman that started the magazine, after I had worked there a year, he lived in Baltimore, and he had started a magazine in Baltimore, sold it for a lot of money, decided to start some other publications, and then sold and moved back to the Baltimore area. So a local couple bought it, and they had never really run a magazine before. So with my 1 year experience, I suddenly became the person who knew the most about it.
You were the expert.
Exactly. I was the expert who didn't get paid, was on commission only. So I just happened to be there and one of the few people that, transferred over when they purchased it. And it was really like a learning experience. We all kind of learned together, but because I was out meeting with people, I learned early on everybody wanted to tell me what they thought the magazine should be. And it ended up being really valuable information because if you're not delivering to people the content or the information or whatever it is they're looking for, you're not going to be successful in selling that to them or having them want to read the magazine. So it was really because I was out there with people, I would hear things. Or people would start telling me things like, oh, I know this new restaurant that's going to open. You should go talk to them. And it suddenly just became this real organic growth of the publication. And it was so, again, we didn't have any money to market it. So one of the first things that I started seeing was this rise in people wanting to see other people in magazines. Like, who was at this party and who are the, in People magazine or In Style magazine. And I was like, that's interesting. I wonder if we could start doing that here. So I literally personally bought a digital camera and I started going to charity events and taking people's photos
And people
and
love
putting
it.
them in the
Wow.
magazine. And that became marketing for the magazine, because I would say, hello, could I take your picture for Lehigh Valley Style? And I would just go from event to event and take pictures. And then we started publishing them. And people really gravitated to it. All of a sudden, charities wanted us to, be at their event to publish pictures. People would start saying, the first thing I look for in the magazine is to see who is in it. And it just organically became this marketing tool, like for the magazines. It got us in front of a lot of people who didn't know about us, and it also made people, they couldn't wait to see if they were going to make the issue.
People wanted to pick it up, and then I would imagine that rolls into advertisers and editorial and everything else. Well, we have been so fortunate to have a relationship with you and Lehigh Valley Style for the last, I don't know, it's been a while now, 6 years, 7 years, a while. And it's amazing in that time to see at these events the lines that have formed to get on your style wall. So I imagine you guys probably went from having 30 pictures to choose from to 300 pictures to choose from.
I mean, actually, there are so many things going on that I feel bad we can't cover all of them. There's so many events and so many awesome things going on, and I feel bad now having to say no. Like we only have 4 or 5 pages a month, to do this, or I can't always get a photographer. So
and there's so much going on.
I know, and so it's challenging now. Like before, we were struggling, to be seen, and now the demand is so great, and we're grateful for that as well.
What about that whole the charity scene spoke to you? Because I think it's something that I often say that when I moved here 15 years ago, I was very struck by the philanthropic nature of this community. I feel like everybody in any walk of life, with any socioeconomic group background, all kind of care about their community or different organizations. It struck me as really interesting. Of course, we built a brand around that as well.
Right.
But why did that speak to you? I mean, it's personally important to me. And
I think being at the magazine, I started seeing first, like people would send us press releases or invitations, to certain events. And I think it was the first time in my life I saw the wide scope of things that you're describing. There are so many charities and so many people that are so dedicated, and they don't have, they're struggling, they're trying to raise money, they're trying to not spend money. I just started being exposed to all of it.
And platform that you could use.
And it did really, like, because I didn't have a budget to spend, but what we could give was our time, and we could, give people that little platform to run the photos or show up at the event. And it also, something I've always felt strongly about, no matter what you do, you have to differentiate yourself from your competitors. So that became our biggest. There were other publications, and even, we were not just trying to get advertising dollars or readers, from other magazines, the newspaper or, billboards and radio. People spend their money there. So we were trying to have a presence and be known and differentiate ourselves from our competitors, and giving back turned out to be like a really important key thing for us, as a magazine and a brand, and also, in the community.
Well, it's certainly proven to work well and to differentiate you guys. And I think you're such good stewards of the community, and people know that. So we love that. Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to do a rapid fire round. So
Got it.
For people listening out there who are maybe starting out in their careers, and you had I would call a non-traditional path.
Absolutely.
What is your advice to them? What do you say to that 18-year-old or 22-year-old about they're about to embark on?
Okay, I have a couple things. And this one is real, these are all real hot topics for me. First, raise your hand first. Like, raise your hand first, volunteer to do the job, do it well, and impress your boss, impress your professor, impress the people that are around you, and they'll want to lift you up. I think internships are super important. When I'm hiring someone, if I'm looking at 5 or 10 people who just came out of college, but I have someone who had an internship in their field or the field that they're trying to be employed in, I think it is so, so valuable. Like our editor, Kristen, she's a superstar. And I was interviewing people who had years of experience, but I wasn't sure about. But, as a college student, she had internships at 17 magazine and Men's Health. And I was able to talk to the publishers of those publications, and they were like, she's a rock star. So having, that ability to talk to someone who, can testify to even if you have no experience, or no real work experience,
they know what ethic,
you can, exactly.
They know your attitude.
Exactly.
I mean, I've gone on to hire, I don't know how many I have now. Dakota, our producer here, as an intern. So we've hired, and I just think it's a great opportunity for people to see what you're made of.
Yeah.
Whether they hire you or not, I totally agree. The internships are so valuable.
Yeah. And I think, too, I feel like I'm always looking for people who do not have a sense of entitlement. I think it's important, like I said, like volunteer, go in early, stay late, take out the trash, even though it's not your job. And don't expect that people are going to hand you things. Those are the people that I think end up becoming superstars.
Yeah, because they just have that team atmosphere, do whatever it takes to get the job done. Awesome advice, Pam Deller. All right, we're going to do our rapid fire round. I'd like to confirm with the listeners out there that you have not heard these questions.
I have not heard these. I'm dreading these questions.
All right, if you were an ice cream flavor, what would you be and why?
Oh, really? I don't even like ice cream.
You don't have to eat it. I'm talking about if you were described, like if someone were to describe you.
Oh, describing
right.
me
Yes, as an ice cream flavor.
Probably vanilla.
Oh, gosh, I would never describe you as vanilla.
I'm simple. I am simple. Very simple.
I would describe you as like something like a rainbow, I don't know, or like one of those bubblegum colored, like something, I don't know, you're always so beautiful. It would be a beautiful colored ice cream.
Well, thank you.
If you could pick up a certain skill instantly, what would it be? What skill do you wish you had that you do not have?
Math. I can't do math. I would just if I could compute things in my head, I literally have to think about it or do it,
Write it
with
out
pencil and paper.
longhand.
Well, I mean, thank goodness for iPhones, but
yeah. I'm the same way. Although my mother always said if you put a dollar sign in front of it, she got real good at math really fast.
That's fabulous.
Okay, if you could have 3 guests to dinner, who would they be?
Oprah Winfrey, for sure. I'm so inspired by her. Probably Meryl Streep. I think she's just so interesting. And probably Anna Wintour from Vogue, just to satisfy my
what a dinner,
my magazine fix.
I love it. Oh my gosh, that's great. What's the best place you've ever traveled to?
I think the best place I ever traveled to was Vietnam. My oldest daughter lived there for 2 years, and I had the pleasure of going there and spending 10 days with her and just bike riding through the country and swimming in the South China Sea. And it was just an incredible experience.
Wow, I've heard great things.
Yeah.
What is a place you've never been that you hope to go?
Oh, there's so many places. I have never been to Italy. I think I'm the only person in the world who's never been to Italy, so I think I need to get there really
Bucket
soon.
list. You have to get there.
Yes.
All right, let's make a goal for that. And the last thing I'm going to ask you is next year will be 20 years for the magazine. What does the next 20 look like? What's on the horizon?
It's funny because I love what I do, and I hope to do it as long as possible. But what I'm finding is, on the horizon, for me personally, is just more quality time in my life. More stand-up paddleboarding, more walks on the Saucon Rail Trail, those kinds of things. Working more of that into, I love my life, but working more of that stuff into
Finding more balance and more time for you. Well, I think that's an awesome goal, Pam. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Ashley.
We encourage everybody to go out there, read Lehigh Valley Style Magazine, tell your friends, get to an event, get in front of that style wall as soon as you can. Thanks, Pam, for joining us.
Thanks, Ashley.
You've been listening to Unscripted with Russo. Until next time.